Okay, so it is 9 o'clock and we have a kind of ambitious schedule today. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the introduction, get started with the agenda. So as people come in, please introduce yourselves. This is the eighth annual Dry Farming Collaborative Winter Convening. And I'm your co-host, Lucas Niebert, joined by Matt Davis. We both work for the OSU Dry Farming Project. And also, this meeting was supported by Tegan Moran of OSU Small Farms Extension. And it's going to be a 3-hour meeting plus, depending on how long discussions take. And Matt, if you'll advance to the next slide, go over more of an orientation. So the format of this meeting is mostly 15 to 30-minute talks. I'll be giving a 30-minute introduction talk covering the two topics of who is the Dry Farming Collaborative and dry farming context, principles, and resources. And then there'll be 3 sessions, each with 2 15-minute talks. We'll have a dry farm tomatoes section, followed by a break, and then 2 more sessions, the dry farming in gardens and urban landscapes, and finally, beyond dry farming, place-based perspectives on water resilience. So I guess we might as well start with who is here. The Dry Farming Collaborative is folks who show up at these meetings. For one, it's all of you. And so thank you for coming. Thank you for participating. We have of the people registered, we have a lot of people represented from Oregon. That's kind of where the Dry Farming Collaborative got its roots. And also Pacific Northwest, Washington, BC, Northern California. And then we also have members from other parts of the United States, New England, Midwest, and Canada. And we also have attendees from as far afield as New Zealand, Colombia, Ecuador, Chile, and Serbia and Ukraine. So thank you all for being here. Next slide, please. So you all had to answer a few questions in the event registration. And so here's graphical representation of who you guys are. So mostly this group identifies as gardeners in their relation to growing food. And that's also reflected in the number of acres managed. There's, most everybody has less than 5 acres of land they're managing. And then years of experience growing food. A lot of folks have experience growing food in general in this group, but there's relatively little dry farm experience here. There's a lot of beginners, a lot of folks who are just getting started. Next slide. So for the Dry Farming Collaborative, the history of the Dry Farming Collaborative, just to give you guys a little more context, it was kind of born out of the OSU Dry Farming Project, which was initiated by Amy Garrett, OSU Small Farms Extension. And Amy was getting a lot of questions from growers who were worried about water or didn't have enough water, and started case studies studying growers who had been dry farming for many years. And then in 2015 started the first dry farming demonstration site. And some of you all might remember that was a very bad drought year in the Pacific Northwest. And so from that, there was a first Dry Farming Collaborative winter meeting in 2016. And we've met every winter since that. It started in Grange halls, small person-to-person events, and now it's grown into these larger virtual events. And hope we can try to maintain a little bit of that, peer-to-peer interaction in our discussion groups at the end of the day. And then in 2019, the Dry Farming Institute got started. Amy Garrett also initiated the Dry Farming Institute. And the Dry Farming Institute is a nonprofit, and it has programming dedicated to advancing dry farming outreach. And we'd like to collaborate across, the university, the collaborative, and the institute. Next slide. Just a slide on the OSU dry farming project. I'm going to have just a lot of slides with a lot of content, and also there's going to be links to content in the websites. So we might be going a little fast through the slides, but you can also have access to all of these slides, by the way. So the dry farming project website, there's lots of resources you can access on past research project reports and presentations, extension publications, and more supplemental books, reading, and videos. The Dry Farming Collaborative, I recommend going to the YouTube channel. There's a lot of informational videos there. We also have some research projects highlighted and past recordings from events. The Dry Farming Institute, nonprofit, the mission is to empower growers to thrive with less water. This is the website. You can find it at dryfarming.org, also linked in our meeting webpage. Next. And the Dry Farming Institute main programming include a dry farming resource hub to enable growers to improve dry farming outcomes through engagement of the growers, freely accessible online resources, and things like that. There's a dry farm marketing campaign for dry farm produce that includes marketing materials and trying to forge new marketing avenues for dry farm crops. We also have the Resilient Seed Stewardship Program, and the main activities include adapting varieties for dry farm performance, and also making varieties that do well dry farm more readily available. I'm also on the board of the Dry Farming Institute, along with Amy Garrett and others. Next slide. There's plenty of other organizations involved with dry farming. To name a few, there's notably Native Seed Search in Tucson, Arizona, saving and stewarding seeds that are desert adapted. There's the Organic Seed Alliance that's doing dry farming work, particularly in Northern California. Agrarian Sharing Network is Pacific Northwest based. They have propagation fairs, mostly around Oregon, and are really focusing in on dry farm seeds and rootstocks. And then there's a Culinary Breeding Network, which has been working to market and promote dry farm produce. And then finally, there's a number of seed companies. These are just a few. There's that are selling seeds that have that for varieties that do well dry farmed. Great. So now I'm going to just move into the basics in dry farming. So this is a dry farm plot that we have near Corvallis, Oregon, and this is in mid-September. You can see it's still luscious green colored squash, and into the horizon is kind of your more conventional grass seed crops that they're also dry farmed, but less green this time of year. Next slide. So what is dry farming? So dry farming is a form of rain-fed agriculture. Rain-fed agriculture relies solely on precipitation for water needs without any irrigation. Dry farming has been defined as unirrigated crop production during a dry season, usually in a region that receives 20 inches or more of annual rainfall. Dryland farming is considered to be unirrigated crop production in a region that receives less than 20 inches of annual rainfall. You see, these are kind of arbitrary distinctions in some ways, but really with dry farming, you can grow quite a few more crops than you can in areas with lower precipitation. And these definitions are not universal, and practices will differ based on place, but the two basic strategies in dry farming are, number one, soil water conservation, and number two, drought resilient plants. So Hopi is one of the few places I know where corn is raised to fit the environment and the environment not manipulated to fit the corn. That's a quote from a presentation by Michael Kotawa Johnson. He's a Hopi farmer, and this concept of being place-based, that you have to work within the means of your environment, and that includes the plants, rather than shaping the environment to fit certain ideas of what your plant should be. Next slide. So you can see his presentation. He presented 2 years ago at the 2021 Dry Farming Collaborative Winter Convening in a presentation called Hopi Dry Farming, 2,000 Years of Resiliency. And it really highlights how dry farming is a place-based practice, and it increases your intimacy with a place. Next slide, please. So speaking of the place where the Dry Farming Collaborative got started, and a lot of the research has been with Oregon State University, Willamette Valley History of Dry Farming. Dry farming is an indigenous place-based practice. Growing food within the means of the environment has become less common around the world due to colonization and modernization of agriculture, including modern irrigation systems. In the Willamette Valley, the Kalapuya dry farmed by maintaining ecosystems of prairie and savanna, mostly with cultural burns. And this promoted the growth of native food plants associated with those ecosystems: tarweed, hazelnuts, camas, acorns, and berries. When the settlers came through and displaced and killed the Kalapuya, they dry farmed using European methods and tools, with crops brought from other parts of the Americas and overseas, including corn, beans, squash, tomato, potato, fruit, and nut trees. And we're taking upon these traditions and trying to adapt them and innovate them into the future. So the climate of the Willamette Valley and a lot of the coastal maritime Pacific Northwest is a temperate dry summer, which is also called the Mediterranean climate. And this can be seen in other parts of the world as well. It's not an extremely common climate, but we see it in a lot of more coastal associated ecosystems, as well as sometimes continental geographies that are a little higher elevation. Next slide. And this climate is distinguished by a really high precipitation wet season. The blue bars is the precipitation on the left, and a very dry, warm growing season. So during the hottest months, it's the driest. And so we have this, the dry season, we have to use water from the wet season, and that is stored in the soil. And you can see this picture of precipitation in Oregon. The Cascade Mountains sort of make this rain shadow effect in Eastern Oregon, where dry farming is a lot more easily done, a lot more accessible in Western Oregon due to the rainfall patterns. So basic dry farming principles. We have in spring, well, I suppose I'll start with the location. You first need to identify a suitable location for dry farming, and we'll do, there's a whole slide on sites suitability that I'll get to. But then early planting is key. You plant into moist topsoil, ideally, and so the plants can get established while there's still moisture in the topsoil. Then through the summer months, you do not irrigate. Instead, you allow the plants to do what they do best, which is to seek out water in the soil, and you enable the roots to extend down into the soil. The topsoil will dry out, but the roots will keep finding moisture further down. In the fall, if you have good, reliable crop varieties that do well dry farm, then you should get some high quality harvest out of that. Unrestricted roots will grow several feet deep to capture water throughout the soil profile. And I guess I just want to note that if you irrigate, then the roots can be concentrated at the surface of the soil. And then when the surface dries out, then your plants are in trouble. So we have an example on the top right of tomato roots that were dry farmed on the left side, and then tomato roots that were irrigated on the right. You see the rooting structures are very different because dry farming facilitates the roots going down to meet the moisture in the soil. And indeed, when you dig in the late summer, you'll still find moisture in some soils suitable for dry farming. You'll find moisture down there, and the plants are accessing that moisture. Next slide, please. So this is what we observed during the 2021 heat wave. There was, very high temperatures for numerous days in Oregon, Washington, DC, Northern California. And this picture on the left was taken a couple days after the heat wave. And we have our bush dry beans and corn variety. And we found that our dry farm plants handled the heat wave pretty well. The topsoil had long ago dried out, and they were accessing moisture further in the subsoil, and that was kind of buffered from the heat. So whereas irrigated agriculture, a lot of folks were watering more during the heat wave to try to prevent the topsoil from drying out. Our plants were already growing within their means and able to access that subsoil moisture, though there was certainly some damage to some plants. So there are benefits and there are risks or costs in dry farming. We already covered a couple of the benefits: water conservation, climate resilience. Also, some people don't think of this, but dry farming is less expensive. It can be less expensive due to a lot less time spent weeding, a lot less materials spent exercising weed control, and as well as irrigation related expenses, time managing irrigation, paying for irrigation materials. Other benefits include there's new marketing opportunities. Dry farm tomatoes are a really big thing. Increased flavor of produce is often claimed in dry farm produce, and storability of produce. I'll get to dry farm squash, winter squash in a minute here for an example. And then you can grow on land with no water rights or access to irrigation if you have the right soil, the right location for dry farming. So it increases options. Costs include, it's not a yield maximization strategy, so you will get lower yield than irrigated in most cases. There's also less room for error, and so there's a higher risk for crop failures. You need to be sure you're dry farming on the right site, have adequate site preparation and timing, excuse me, and use appropriate cultivars. And this picture on the right is a new dry farm site that I tried growing squash on. You could see the withered squash on the bottom, and it just wasn't a very suitable site. I ended up having access to irrigation, so I watered it and it bounced right back. And so that's to show that if you do have access to irrigation, it can really make things easier in the short term. But dry farming does have its benefits as well. But drought stress can also negatively impact produce quality if you are having drought stress plants. And who knows what extreme weather conditions, like really many hot days, can do in the future to dry farm production. And finally, we just have a lack of cultural knowledge, or there's certain cultural knowledge that are just not shared by a lot of people. And so we need to really improve our knowledge, our collective knowledge of dry farming. So these next few slides are going to be highlights of OSU research, and I'm going to go through them pretty quickly just so we have like maybe 5 minutes or so of questions at the end before we get to the next talks. So, and there's links on the website. So this is site suitability study. We've been pulling soil cores, and with the help of soil expert Andy Gallagher, have been assessing their water holding capacity and suitability for dry farming. Basically, deeper soils that hold better water are more suitable for dry farming. Next slide. We've approached soil management in a couple short-term trials. We haven't been able to do long-term trials. And we found that this cultural practice of dust mulch, which is a deep kind of really dusty layer, didn't in this case reduce soil water loss any more than regular surface cultivation. And then we also found some interesting results on blossom end rot in tomatoes that I won't get into right now. Next slide, please. We also have gotten into winter storage tomatoes or hanging tomatoes. Undergraduate student Asher Whitney was the lead on these projects, and these are native to the Mediterranean countries and store through the winter. Next slide, please. Winter squash trials. We found that although certain irrigated squash varieties can out yield dry farm squash in the short term, in the long term through storage. So over the course of the winter months, dry farm squash can yield more due to less loss to rot in storage. Next slide, please. We're also working with NREL, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, to study how dry farming can work well with agrivoltaics. We find that that the solar panels can provide shading and wind buffering that could be beneficial for dry farming. Next slide. And the Dry Farm Culinary Corn Project, which is my own project that I've been working on a few years. We are adapting culinary field corn varieties for dry farming in the Pacific Northwest. Here's a couple of varieties. This graph in the bottom shows how Open Oak Party Mix, the dry farming adapted version of the corn, tends to outperform the original when dry farmed. Next slide. We're also working with Three Sisters Nixtamal to try to make this dry farm adapted Oaxacan green dent corn more widely available in the state for special local green tortillas. We're also initiated the OSU dry farming project has the dry farm mapping project, and we're trying to create a large scale map using data that's readily available to assess suitability for dry farming across Oregon, and then we can expand it to other states and regions. But the idea is we can inform policy decisions by knowing how much land is able to be dry farmed and how much water can be saved. Next slide. Finally, there's the Dry Farming Accelerator Program. So we're in the first year of this, and it is a program where you're guided through a dry farming curriculum, an introduction to dry farming curriculum, which is going to be a free online course. We're doing complementary soil testing to assess your site suitability, and you can consult and collaborate with dry farm researchers and farmers. These are a few sites, a few farms where we were working with in November to assess their site suitability for dry farming, and so they're posing with their 5-foot deep soil cores. And that's all I have for this first introductory talk, and we have looks like 3 minutes for questions. I don't know if anyone has any questions in the chat.
All right, so we have one question here that is from Jordan. So you were talking about soils that have better soil moisture holding capacity. Any tips on ways to cultivate that kind of soil, or just luck of the land? Is there a way to build better soil water holding capacity?
Yeah, it's a great question. A short answer would be building organic matter, and I know that the talk at 10:30 by Rhythm Seed Farm, they're going to talk about how deep mulching can help with your soil water conservation, maybe in a soil where you have less water holding capacity.
From CF, we have the question, how do you enroll in that last class?
The Dry Farming Accelerator program, the links are on the website. So, and also on the bulletin board, you can sign up. There's limited capacity, so there's going to be a sign up or a application process. Yeah.
And I should say too that, yeah, did you mention that the website's going to be like open to anyone?
Oh, that's, yeah, good. Yeah, the website that is going to be open to everyone. The online course will be free once it's fully developed.
Yeah, and
What
Aaron
website?
and Firecat Tom ask, what is that website?
Yeah, it's it's our meeting website, which we have the link for right here.
Layla asks, our season seems to go quickly from too cold and wet to too much slugs and pest pressure to too hot for plants to establish without water. We have good soil. How does dry farming work with those conditions?
Yeah, there's different practices in every place, and so just my short answer is I'm no expert on your environment, and so unfortunately we don't have a lot of cultural knowledge of this, and so a lot of it is trying things out and trying to connect with other people growing in your area.
All right, well, that seems to do it for questions for now. I guess if anyone has any other follow-up questions or would like to, feel like their question wasn't answered adequately, there'll be time at the end of the meeting where we'll have breakout room discussions and you can ask Lucas or me, either then or after the meeting. We'll be sticking around a little bit. So you can ask us then.